Yes, 2020.
Nation, hello and welcome to Newsnight. I'm Amritpal Singh. Well, the nation today got 7 new defence PSUs. The old Ordnance Factory Board has been restructured. The Prime Minister, while inaugurating that, said that this is the roadmap towards becoming self-reliant in defence production and going on to become the world's biggest military power. Well, that's the big story that we're tracking here on Vijay Dashmi. Wish you all a very happy Vijay Dashmi. I'm Amritpal Singh. Let's begin with the headlines we're tracking at this hour. Nation gets 7 new defence companies on Vijay Dashmi. Companies carved out of the Ordnance Factory Board to specialise in 7 critical sectors. Prime Minister Modi says these factories to form a strong base for self-reliance in defence manufacturing. Ordnance Factory Board employees transferred to new defence companies. PM assures employees' interests will be protected. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh says the government will provide financial support to the new companies if required. Prime Minister Narendra Modi performs Bhumi Pujan of the boys' hostel built by Saurashtra Patel Seva Samaj in Surat. Praises the spirit of service in the people of Gujarat. Says despite not having any caste-based political or dynastic background, I was made the head of government due to people's blessings. Prime Minister Modi says the economy recovered very fast after a tough phase of COVID pandemic. Cites IMF, which recently said that India is once again on its way to become the fastest growing economy of the world. Union Home Minister Amit Shah visits port player Cellular jail in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, pays tributes to Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, says it's distressing to find people questioning his patriotism and contribution. RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat expresses concerns over rising population and changing demographic profile of the country. In his annual Vijay Dashmi address, Bhagwat also calls for the need of a national population policy. Terrorists involved in civilian killings in Srinagar gunned down in an encounter with security forces in Pulwama. 1 AK rifle along with ammunition recovered. Nation celebrates Dussehra, marking the victory of good over evil. President Ramnath Kovind, Prime Minister Narendra Modi greet the people on the occasion. Durga idols immersed in water bodies after puja. So those were the headlines, and now the news in detail. As part of a major reform initiative to boost India's defence production, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday dedicated to the nation 7 new defence public sector undertakings or companies carved out of the erstwhile Ordnance Factory Board. Prime Minister Modi said that the 7 new companies would form a strong base for military strength of the country in the times to come. More in this report. On the occasion of Vijay Dashmi on Friday, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh dedicated to the nation 7 new defence companies carved out of the Ordnance Factory Board. To enhance functional autonomy, efficiency and unleash new growth potential and innovation, the government had decided to convert OFB from a government department into 700% government entities as a measure to improve self-reliance in defence preparedness. The Prime Minister addressed the function virtually and said that the decision of creating these companies was stuck for a long time and expressed the belief that these 7 companies would form a strong base for the military strength of the country in the times to come.
41 ऑर्डिनेंस फैक्ट्रीज को नए स्वरूप में किए जाने का निर्णय, 7 नई कंपनियों की ये शुरुआत देश की इसी संकल्प यात्रा का हिस्सा है। ये निर्णय पिछले 15-20 साल से लटका हुआ था। मुझे पूरा भरोसा है कि ये सभी 7 कंपनियां आने वाले समय में भारत की सैन्य ताकत का एक बहुत बड़ा आधार बनेगी।
The Prime Minister said it's our target that our companies not only establish expertise in their products but also become a global brand. He appealed to the new companies that research and innovation should be a part of their work culture. He said that these new companies would play an important role in import substitution in line with the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat.
आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान के तहत देश का लक्ष्य भारत को अपने दम पर दुनिया की बड़ी सैन्य ताकत बनाने का है। भारत में आधुनिक सैन्य इंडस्ट्री के विकास का है। पिछले 7 वर्षों में देश ने मेक इन इंडिया के मंत्र के साथ अपने इस संकल्प को आगे बढ़ाने का काम किया है। आज देश के डिफेंस सेक्टर में जितनी ट्रांसपेरेंसी है, ट्रस्ट है और टेक्नोलॉजी ड्रिवन अप्रोच है, उतनी पहले कभी नहीं थी।
The Prime Minister said that the nation's defense export has increased by 325% in the last 5 years. He said that restructuring would provide more autonomy to the new companies to nurture innovation and expertise, and the new companies should encourage such talent. He reiterated that the government has also ensured that the interests of employees are fully protected.
सरकार ने सभी कंपनियों को एक बेहतर प्रोडक्शन एनवायरनमेंट देने के साथ साथ पूरी फंक्शनल ऑटोनॉमी भी दी है। इसके साथ ही ये भी सुनिश्चित किया गया है इन फैक्ट्रीज के कर्मचारियों के हित पूरी तरह से सुरक्षित रहें। मुझे पूरा भरोसा है कि देश को आपकी एक्सपर्टाइज का बहुत लाभ होगा और हम सब मिलकर आत्मनिर्भर भारत के अपने संकल्प को पूरा करेंगे।
Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh said the move reflects the government's resolve of achieving Atmanirbhar Bharat. He exuded confidence that the new structure will help in overcoming various shortcomings in the existing system of OFB and provide these companies incentive to become competitive and explore new opportunities in markets, including exports, while safeguarding the interest of the employees.
ऑर्डिनेंस फैक्ट्री बोर्ड के सभी एम्प्लॉइज ग्रुप ए, बी एंड सी को केंद्र सरकार के कर्मचारियों के रूप में 2 साल की अवधि के लिए डीम्ड डेपुटेशन पर और कॉर्पोरेट एंटिटीज में स्थानांतरित किया जाएगा। सेवानिवृत्त और मौजूदा कर्मचारियों की पेंशन लायबिलिटीज सरकार द्वारा वहन की जाती रहेगी और इस प्रकार हमारी कमिटमेंट के अनुरूप किसी भी कर्मचारी की सेवा शर्तों पर कोई प्रतिकूल प्रभाव नहीं पड़ा है और उनके हितों की पूरी तरह से रक्षा भी की गई है।
The government has given these new companies not only better production environment but also complete functional autonomy. The Ministry of Defence has set a target of achieving a turnover of 1.75 lakh crore rupees in aerospace and defence goods and services by 2024, including in exports of 35,000 crore rupees. Nandita Dagar's report, DD India. So this will help in making India more self-reliant when it comes to defense production and bring in an enabling environment that makes them more competitive. Now, what exactly is the change and what are these new 7 companies going to do? How is the ordnance board, factory board restructured? Let's take a look at what these 7 new defense companies are and what they will be doing. Well, if we take a look, one is the Advanced Weapons and Equipment India Limited. This will be involved in manufacturing of basically small arms and weapons for armed forces and the police. It will have the various factories under it which were earlier producing. It has got defense orders worth 4,066 crore rupees. Of course, it's headquartered in Kanpur. This particular company, which will further have factories all over the country, which will report to this defense PSU. The other is the Armored Vehicles Nigam Limited. They produce vehicles, tanks, armored vehicles. It's backed the contract for defense goods worth 30,025 crore rupees, which is the highest contract among all the new 7 defense PSUs. It is headquartered in Chennai. The Munitions India Limited, or the MIL, it manufactures general purpose machinery related to defense. This company shall be based out of Pune in Maharashtra. Also, the Yantra India Limited, or the YIL, it manufactures components such as shells of ammunitions. YIL has inherited the assets of the erstwhile Ordnance Factory Board worth 11,000 crore rupees. The company shall be headquartered in Nagpur in Maharashtra. The fourth company, the Troop Comfort Limited, or the TCL, it manufactures wearing apparel except for those made out of fur. This company will be headquartered in Kanpur. The other company, the Gliders India Limited, or the GIL, it's involved in manufacturing textiles for the armed forces and the other security forces. It's headquartered in Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh. The India Optal Limited, or the IOL, it is involved in manufacturing of electrical machinery and apparatus for the defense forces. This company will be headquartered in Dehradun in Uttarakhand. So these are the 7 defense companies which were dedicated to the nation by the Prime Minister today. They are basically restructuring of the Ordnance Factory Board and to try and create an environment which makes them more competitive, which makes them more production and efficiency oriented. And that brings us to our point of discussion, or our in focus tonight. Our in focus tonight is powering up defense manufacturing. That's what our in focus tonight is, powering up defense manufacturing. We will be discussing that in today's show, how these companies will create a roadmap, as the Prime Minister says, to making India more competitive. To talk about that, I am joined by Dr. Vijay Kumar Saraswat. He's a member of the Niti Aayog, and also Commodore Mukesh Bhargav. He's a retired Commodore. He's the founder director of the Defense Innovators Industry Association. Both gentlemen, many thanks for joining me on the show. First to you, Dr. Saraswat. When the Prime Minister says it will create an enabling environment for excellence, for competitiveness, what does he mean by that? What is the structural change that the government is trying to ensure by restructuring the Ordnance Factory Board? For somebody like a layman like me, what was wrong with the OFB, and what new do these 7 restructured defense PSUs bring on the table?
Restructuring of the ordnance factories has been on the card for many years. As the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, it has been a call for the last 15 years, and now our government today has taken a very reformative step in terms of restructuring these ordnance factories in the form of 7 companies, which are going to be autonomous, which will provide the competitiveness, which will give them the pathways for augmenting their production efforts. It will also make it happen. They will be more competitive. they can not only produce goods for the domestic requirements, but they can even do export. The autonomy which will be there, which was earlier concentrated in the form of ordnance factory board with 41 mammoth structure, and also it was formed like a government department. So manufacturing and innovation requires a different ecosystem, and that is the ecosystem which is being created in the form of these 7 companies today, which will entail that we will be able to now do the production of the arms as identified for the armed forces more in a competitive manner with the latest technologies, with the latest productivity and efficiency, which will bring in better self-reliance, which will also bring competitiveness, which will also provide the state-of-the-art weapon systems to the country at the minimum cost. That is the most important. Efficiency will come in. Autonomy will certainly bring in a faster decision-making, meeting the goals of the defense requirements in its totality. And you will notice that bringing 7 major companies, and under each company there are a group of other companies which will be participating, which will also enable a larger participation of the private industry in the form of outsourcing, which will enable a much stronger and robust defense production ecosystem in the country. The whole idea is to enlarge the landscape of the defense production, enabling more and more MSMEs, more and more private companies to work with these 7 companies together to give a competitive output in time, at cost, at the state-of-the-art technology to the armed forces.
Okay.
I think this is the purpose of this reform which the government of India has done today.
Commodore Commodore Bhargav, what I understand from Dr. Saraswat's remarks is that basically the government is trying to cut the red tape here and say by giving them autonomy, these companies will be able to take their own decisions, which will be faster, be it collaboration with private companies. They don't have to keep looking back to the MOD for decision making. They can take their own decisions. That leads to efficiency and therefore a more competitive environment, which is more production friendly. Apart from that, is that the sole reason, or is there another reason that they needed to be let out of the so-called government stranglehold, because they still remain the defense PSUs, they report to the MOD?
Thank you, and I think Dr. Saraswat has very rightly pointed out the reasons for that. But let's understand what was ailing, as you asked earlier, the question with regard to the Ordnance Factory Board. There were 3 committees which were formed with Mr. T.K.S. Nair in the year 2000, Kelkar Committee in 2005, and Vice Admiral Raman Puri's committee in 2015. And there were other committees also, Dr. Ramarao Committee, who have all recommended a restructuring. Now, when we look at the restructuring, we need to understand what is the difference between a corporatization and the privatization. This is not privatized, it is only corporatized. Okay. And in the corporatization, the government still retains 100% ownership, but gives it the freedom to run not as a government department, but as a corporate entity with its having separate legal entity, having its own managerial autonomy, board of directors, CEO, and all the production and the supply chain issues can be handled by themselves, transparency and reporting on financial side, and also the liabilities. But most importantly, the issues which were there, which get addressed by this new structure, are the mainly 3 issues. First was pertaining to the poor quality, which was leading to the loss of confidence of the troops on the ground on the ammunition and the weapon system that they were getting, which was a major issue, especially when you look at the morale of the soldier on the ground. The second issue was that since it was a kind of a monopoly for the ammunition and the weapon systems and armored vehicles, as well as other defense stores, it was leading to a higher cost of procurement for the Ministry of Defense, which was leading to, especially with regard to the constraint on the defense budget, it was giving lesser value for the money that was being spent, and it was not being, I would say, optimally utilized. And the nomination culture was leading to the the order value getting also delayed, which was impacting the combat readiness of the troops. All these three issues with this restructuring would definitely get addressed. And as Dr. Saraswat very rightly brought it out, that it will lead to greater autonomy. It would also, the other two issues which had also come out in the CAG report of 2019 was that the overhead of the ordnance factory was constituting to nearly 33% of the indent value, which means that, and the major cost factors were the supervisory cost and the labor cost, which is not something that efficiently run corporate would able to absorb. And the second part, as I mentioned, was the delays production. All these issues will now get addressed, and the upside, if you look at it from creation of these new entities, would be that these new entities would eliminate the inefficiency which is kind of inherent in a government department. The supply chain management would definitely see an upside. There would be an incentive for the new factories, new PSUs to become competitive, not just with the Indian private companies, but also globally competitive. And this would lead to exploring newer opportunities, not only in the technology, but also in the product range. Let us understand that when we had a competition on one of the make programs where the ordnance factories had to compete with the private sector, the competition did not go through, but it was very surprising to note that ordnance factories were the first to get eliminated. This kind of a thing will never happen once it is corporatized and they have given the autonomy to not only improve how it is run, but also become more efficient and maybe look at, as Dr. Saraswat very rightly mentioned, beyond the Indian market and participate in the global supply chain and maybe start exporting the systems abroad. As you had very rightly mentioned in your opening remarks, that the government is looking at 35,000 crore or $5 billion worth of export target. The ordnance factories, with its infrastructure, with the technology that they have, and now with the corporate structure, with autonomy and efficiency that it will bring in, they can definitely contribute significantly into achieving this onerous task of achieving 35,000 crore of exports.
Okay. Dr. Saraswat, both you and Commodore Bhargav are saying that, they will become more competitive. Companies become more competitive when they enter the market, depending upon what their competitors are offering. Would that now translate down to that if the defense PSU cannot provide a product or technology which is equally competitive with the market or what the market offers, the MOD or the final customer, say the defense forces or police or whichever security agency is their final customer, can make the choice of whether to buy it from them or not?
See, the ordnance factories were a dedicated system which was working under the government Department of Defense Production as a department.
Right.
So the accounting procedures, the value engineering which goes with the competitiveness, many of these features were missing. And the cost at which the equipments were being supplied to the armed forces, probably there was no competition with the private sector or public sector, even PSUs for that matter, because it was a department. So there was that kind of an element was missing at that time. As a result, we were not getting value for the money. Now, with this kind of a restructuring and and of course, today the government of India has taken a major decision for participation of the private sector into defense production. Even the FDI has been permitted in this defense production. So when such kind of an ecosystem is being created, and now with these corporations which are being set up today, they will have to now compete with the PSUs, they will have to compete with the private sector, they will have to compete with the foreign companies which are setting up collaboration with our private companies. That will be creating a very competitive environment for them to perform, both in terms of quality and cost and timeliness. And that's why this is going to become a very efficient ecosystem and efficient reform, which is going to provide to the armed forces the products which they need of quality, of cost, and of indigenous origin. That is what is going to happen. I am also going to tell you that this will create a very strong supply chain ecosystem in the country, right from raw materials to the components to the subsystems and also to the final systems which are required. That will reduce the import content considerably because our private sector will pitch in with the right kind of indigenous subsystems. And also those companies which were once upon a time acting only as a component production companies, they will develop subsystems with the help of the outsourcing which will be done by the corporations today. So this ecosystem is called the competitive ecosystem. Now that kind of a thing cannot happen in a government department setup, and that's why corporatization or the PSU culture is absolutely essential. And that's why I think this reform, which was due for many years, has been brought in a very timely manner. Now, the kind of indigenous technologies which are going from DRDO into the defense production, both private and public today, and ordnance factories will be playing now a much bigger role than what they had earlier. Otherwise, it was a very limited role of the indigenous production from the DRDO to them. In fact, PSUs were pitching up with much better participation. And I'm sure now, with this kind of a reform, there will be a much larger TOT and shareholding. And the great thing that will happen is because of autonomy, that they will start innovating. They will become designers. There will be better design thinking that come in the ordnance factories now, which was missing. It was purely based upon some licensed technologies which were coming from different sources, and they used to produce. Now the design thinking, innovation will certainly be the hallmark of this particular reform system, which will bring in much better competitiveness, and as I said earlier, the value for the money. And I'm sure the armed forces are going to be happy, and the government of India will be very happy because it is one of the major steps in the area of self-reliance.
Okay. Commodore Bhargav, innovation, Dr. Saraswat pointed out. Innovation is something, in the market, if you don't innovate, you cease to exist because the market just pushes you out. There are no buyers for what you produce, and therefore you cease to exist or become irrelevant. How will innovation be steeped in to this new process of restructuring, and how these new companies or restructured companies will bring in innovation?
I think this is a very relevant point you have brought out with regard to the innovation. One need to look at what is happening globally, and more so in the times of pandemic, which we are currently facing. In fact, we're coming out of that. It has brought to the focus the need for looking differently. Now, if you look at how the contemporary warfare is being played out globally, there is a paradigm change that is happening in the way the future wars are going to be fought. We have the shining example of what happened in the Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict, where the Armenian Air Force was neutralized on the ground using technology of swarms of drones, where man was taken out of the warfare loop. That gives us a kind of a bird's eye view on the future warfare. And that is where there's a need for innovation and the need for looking differently than how the wars have been fought hitherto.
True.
Right from the chief of the defense staff, the three chiefs of the three services, as well as the prime minister and the defense minister, honorable prime minister and defense minister, have been repeatedly saying there's a need for industry to partner with the academic institution to bring in that cutting edge technology, which can happen through innovation, so that we can look at the warfare of the future. And that would require a new kind of thinking, a new kind of business model. And definitely it cannot happen with the biggest weapon manufacturer in India, the second largest weapon manufacturer in Asia, and the 35th largest weapon manufacturer, the ordnance factory globally. And there was a need for restructuring. And this restructuring would give the autonomy that the ordnance factories need to look at the innovative ways of bringing in the cutting edge, the next gen technology, and the disruptive technology, which are the need of the hour, the requirement of the armed forces, and also of the nation. Luckily, the academic institutions, we have some of the best brains. We are the leader in the startups. There are 61 unicorns which we have been able to create, more than 30 in the financial calendar, and that need to be nurtured, harvested, and leveraged. It cannot be done in a structure of an ordnance factory, which was hitherto. Now, with this new corporatized structure, the autonomy that the CEO of a PSU gets, he leverage this kind of a skill set available in our startups, in our academic institutions, and on the MSMEs and SMEs, which are the niche technology creators, as well as the big companies like the L&T, Tata, Mahindra, Godrej, and Bharat Forge, to see that how the requirement of the future warfare, the requirement of our armed forces, and the changing warfare scenarios can be met through the innovative means, and they would be well structured to at least take the right step in that direction. And it would depend upon the leadership of these PSUs, how they can come up, and as Dr. Saraswat very rightly mentioned, give them the competitiveness to not only compete with the Indian companies, but also globally, with the global companies, and become a part of the global.
As the Prime Minister says that over the past few years, defense exports have increased by 325%, but we need to be more competitive and constantly keep innovating to have that competitive edge both within the country and abroad. Many thanks, Dr. V.K. Saraswat and Commodore Mukesh Bhargav, for joining me. That's all the time I have on the show for your insights. Thank you very much. Moving on, Prime Minister Narendra Modi performed the Bhumi Pujan ceremony of the boys' hostel built by Saurashtra Patel Seva Samaj in Surat. The Prime Minister said that a person like him with no caste base in politics was blessed by the people to serve as the head of government, both in the state of Gujarat in 2001 when he became Chief Minister, and later as the Prime Minister of the country for 20 years that he's been in public service. He praised the strength and the blessings of the people that enabled him to continue serving the state and later the entire country for more than 20 years without a break.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi performed the Bhumi Pujan ceremony of Hostel Phase 1 built by Saurashtra Patel Seva Samaj in Surat via video conferencing. He praised the spirit of people of Gujarat and said that it is a matter of pride for him that in the tasks of social development, Gujarat has always taken a lead.
साथियों, जब मैं अलग-अलग क्षेत्रों में सेवा के ऐसे कार्यों को देखता हूं, तो मुझे गर्व होता है कि गुजरात किस तरह सरदार पटेल की विरासत को आगे बढ़ा रहा है। सरदार साहब ने कहा था और सरदार साहब के वाक्य हमने अपने जीवन में बांध के रखना है। सरदार साहब ने कहा था, जाति और पंथ को हमें रुकावट नहीं बनने देना है।
The Prime Minister continued about his experience of serving Gujarat as the Chief Minister and said that a person like him with no caste base in politics was blessed by the people to serve the state in 2001. He praised the strength of the blessings of the people that enabled him to continue serving the state and later the entire country for more than 20 years without any break.
आप सबके आशीर्वाद से मुझ जैसे अत्यंत सामान्य व्यक्ति को, जिसका कोई पारिवारिक या राजनीतिक बैकग्राउंड नहीं था, जिसके पास जातिवादी राजनीति का कोई आधार नहीं था, ऐसे मुझ जैसे एक सामान्य व्यक्ति को आपने आशीर्वाद देकर गुजरात की सेवा का मौका 2001 में दिया था। आपके आशीर्वाद की ताकत इतनी बड़ी है कि आज 20 साल से अधिक समय हो गया, फिर भी अखंड रूप से पहले गुजरात की और आज पूरे देश की सेवा करने का सौभाग्य मिला है।
The Prime Minister added that he learnt about the inherent power of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas from Gujarat itself. Recalling that earlier there was a lack of good schools in Gujarat, there was a shortage of teachers for good education. The Prime Minister narrated how he connected people to solve this problem.
सबका साथ, सबका विकास का सामर्थ्य क्या होता है, ये भी मैंने गुजरात से ही सीखा है। एक समय गुजरात में अच्छे स्कूलों की कमी थी, अच्छी शिक्षा के लिए शिक्षकों की कमी थी। उमिया माता का आशीर्वाद लेकर, खोड़ल धाम के दर्शन करके मैंने इस समस्या के समाधान के लिए लोगों का साथ मांगा, लोगों को अपने साथ जोड़ा।
Referring to the robust recovery in the wake of the pandemic, the Prime Minister said that the whole world is full of hope about India with the speed with which the economy has made a comeback after the difficult times of Corona.
कोरोना के कठिन समय के बाद हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था ने जितनी तेजी से वापसी की है, उससे पूरा विश्व भारत को लेकर आशा से भरा हुआ है। अभी हाल में एक विश्व संस्था ने भी कहा है कि भारत फिर दुनिया की सबसे तेजी से आगे बढ़ने वाली अर्थव्यवस्था बनने जा रहा है।
Prime Minister said that with the new national education policy, the option of teaching professional courses in the local language has also been given. The country is now connecting its traditional skills with modern possibilities. Bureau Report, DD India.
RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat has said that a population policy is applicable to all groups for a country like India. While stressing the need for revamping the population policy, he said the population imbalance may pose problems in the country's development. He also underlined the need for creating a national register of citizens to keep a tab on illegal infiltrators. Mohan Bhagwat was addressing the main function of the annual Vijay Dashmi festival at the RSS headquarters in Nagpur.
RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat on Friday performed Shastra Puja at the RSS headquarters in Nagpur on the occasion of Vijay Dashmi. Bhagwat also paid homage to the founders of the RSS and addressed the volunteers. In his traditional Dussehra address, he launched into a tirade against OTT platforms, the narcotics trade and Bitcoin, blaming them all for funding anti-national activities and demanding that all such activities be controlled. The Sangh chief said that everyone is worried about the problem of population growth.
जनसंख्या एक समस्या बन सकती है, वैसे जनसंख्या का असंतुलन भी समस्या बनती है, बन रही है देश में, दुनिया में। हम देख रहे हैं, सब लोग बोल रहे हैं। इसमें किसी के प्रति बुरा भाव नहीं रहता है।
Bhagwat also made some demands from the government in this regard. These included to revisit population policy, curb illegal infiltration, create national register for citizens, and infiltrators to be deprived of the right to purchase land. Mohan Bhagwat also raised the issue of national security and underlined the importance of strengthening border security.
हमारी सीमा सुरक्षा और अधिक चाक चौबंद होने की आवश्यकता है। जहां बार-बार आक्रमण होते वहां तो ठीक ही है, लेकिन जहां नहीं होते ऐसा हम कहते हैं, लेकिन चोरी छुपे होते रहते हैं। सागरी सीमा है, हमारे सागरी प्रदेश में जो टापू है, देश के अंदर की बातें हैं, इन सबको बहुत अच्छा करना चाहिए। इंटरनेट के उपयोग के कारण अब साइबर सिक्योरिटी का भी प्रश्न खड़ा हो गया है। उसके मामले में हमको बहुत आगे जाना पड़ेगा, हम जाएंगे। और ऐसी बातों का परिणाम अंदर उपद्रवी लोगों के मनोबल पर न हुआ तो भी वो कुछ न कर सके, ऐसा हमको ठीक रखना पड़ेगा।
Bhagwat mentioned about the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir and said that the situation has changed in the aftermath of the decision. He stressed on infusing the feeling of nationalism among the people of Kashmir.
भारत से किसी भी भारतीय के रिश्ता लेन देन का नहीं है। हम भारत माता के पुत्र हैं, हम भारत के अंग हैं। कश्मीर की जनता को, उसके मन में उस भावना को हमको विकसित करना पड़ेगा।
The RSS chief also called for returning all temple properties controlled by governments to the Hindu society. Giving the message of unity, Mohan Bhagwat said that Indians need to beware of ideas, individuals, groups and incidents that create differences in the society. Bureau Report, DD India.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah on Thursday visited the Cellular jail in Port Blair and visited cell number 52, where Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, was lodged for 10 long years during the British rule. He described Savarkar as a source of inspiration for the nation. The Home Minister also slammed those who questioned Savarkar's contribution.
During the Amrit Mahotsav celebration marking the 75th year of independence, the grateful nation is remembering the sacrifice and spirit of all freedom fighters. In this series, Union Home Minister Amit Shah reached the Cellular jail in Port Blair and paid tributes to the freedom fighters.
अंग्रेजों ने बनाई हुई सेल्युलर जेल सबसे बड़ा तीर्थ स्थान है और इसीलिए सावरकर जी कहते थे ये तीर्थों के अंदर महातीर्थ है जहां पर आजादी की ज्योति को प्रज्वलित करने के लिए अनेक हुतात्माओं ने अपना बलिदान दिया.
The Cellular jail and its 698 cells were synonymous with the British atrocities and cruelty when it began to lodge prisoners at that time. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar was sentenced and lodged in the same jail. In the year 1910, he was arrested for the murder of the collector of Nasik and sentenced to Kalapani. He was brought to Port Blair on 11th July 1911 and moved to Cellular jail cell number 52. Union Home Minister said that Savarkar was a hero and scholar. He described Savarkar as a source of inspiration for the nation. He also paid an emotional tribute to Savarkar, reaching the historic cell where he spent nearly 10 long years of rigorous imprisonment. The Home Minister also slammed those who questioned Savarkar's contribution.
वीर सावरकर को वीर की उपाधि कोई सरकार ने नहीं दी, कोई प्रशासन ने नहीं दी. 130 करोड़ की जनता ने मन से सावरकर जी के आगे वीर शब्द को जोड़ा है. वो उनके पराक्रम और उनकी देशभक्ति को एक्नॉलेज करने के, अनुमोदन करने के लिए जोड़ा है. आज कुछ लोग सावरकर जी के जीवन पर सवाल उठा रहे हैं. बड़ा दुख होता है, दर्द होता है, वेदना होती है कि जिस व्यक्ति को एक ही जीवन में 2 जन्म टिप की सजा हुई, उस व्यक्ति की देशभक्ति पर आप सवाल उठा रहे हैं. जिस व्यक्ति ने कई किलोमीटर दूर स्टीमर से छलांग लगाकर भारत के लिए लड़ने का फैसला किया, फ्रांस की धरती पर जाने का फैसला किया, उस व्यक्ति की वीरता पर आप प्रश्न चिन्ह उठा रहे हैं. जो कोल्लू का बेल बनकर 30 पाउंड तेल निकालने की सजा झेलता रहा, उस व्यक्ति की देशभक्ति पर आप सवाल उठा रहे हैं. अरे शर्म करो भाई. एक बार यहां आकर ये तीर्थ स्थान की मुलाकात ले लो तो मन में से सारी शंकाओं का निर्मूलन होगा.
The Union Home Minister also paid tribute to freedom fighter Sachendra Sanyal and said that Sanyal was the only Indian who was twice punished to Kalapani. He urged the youth to play their important role in making a new India. Bureau Report, DD India.
Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who is on a week-long trip to the United States, and the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen met on Thursday in Washington, D.C. for the 8th ministerial meeting of the India-U.S. Economic and Financial Partnership. The 8th India-US EFP marks the growing importance of India-US partnership in the 21st century. It serves as a framework to cement the economic bonds between two vibrant democracies and builds the foundation for greater cooperation and economic growth in the future. Both the leaders discussed a range of subjects, including the macroeconomic outlook and recovery from the pandemic, financial, regulatory and technical collaboration, multilateral engagement, climate finance and anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism. Finance Minister Sitharaman and U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen affirmed their commitment to continue the engagement both bilaterally and multilaterally to address global economic issues. The importance of fighting illicit finance and need for continued cooperation in tackling money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism was also underpinned by the Union Finance Minister and U.S. Treasury Secretary during the meeting. Both the countries agreed on further engagements on emerging financial sector topics such as cross-border payments and payment systems and the development of the International Financial Services Center. The Ministry of Women and Child Development has registered objection to the Global Hunger Report 2021 by Concern Worldwide and Wealth Hunger Health Ministry. The ministry has said that it's shocking to find that the Global Hunger Report 2021 has lowered the rank of India. The publishing agencies of Global Hunger Report have not done their due diligence before releasing the report. The methodology used by FAO is unscientific. The report completely disregards government's efforts to ensure food security and the entire population during COVID period. It is noted with surprise from the FAO report that the state of food security and nutrition in the world 2021 that other 4 countries of this region, that's Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal and Sri Lanka, have not been affected at all by COVID-19 pandemic induced job losses or businesses and the reduction in income levels. The Global Hunger Report 2021 and the FAO report on the state of food security and nutrition in the world 2021 have completely ignored the following facts. As part of economic response to COVID-19, the Government of India has implemented additional nationwide schemes such as Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana and Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme. Manrega wages were increased by rupees 20 with effect from 1st April 2020 to provide an additional 2,000 rupees benefit annually to a worker to benefit approximately 13.62 crore families. A total of 28.4 crore or 204 million Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana women account holders were given ex gratia of 500 rupees per month for 3 months, April to June 2020. A British lawmaker in Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party was stabbed to death on Friday in a church by a man who walked into the meeting with voters from his electoral district. David MS, 69, who represents the South End and South End West in Essex in eastern England, was stabbed at around midday when a meeting at the Belfast Methodist Church in the Ley-on-Sea. Armed police swooped in on the church and said a man had been arrested. The police said that they were not looking for anyone else in connection with the incident. MS's office confirmed that he had been stabbed but gave no further details. Aerial footage from the BBC showed police outside the church as well as a number of emergency vehicles as air ambulance taking off nearby. The church has declined to comment. The United States and Israel have warned Iran that they are exploring other options if Tehran does not return in good faith to negotiations to salvage the 2015 nuclear deal. With talks to revive the deal at a standstill level, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Wednesday that the window is opening up for the Islamic Republic to return to the agreement, and that window is now closing.
US, Israeli and EU officials took a tough line towards Iran on Wednesday, with US officials saying that they would consider all options if Tehran failed to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. Israel, in its response, said that it reserved the right to act. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken told a joint news conference with Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and Emirati Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan that the US is watching Iran's commons posture very, very carefully.
We are getting closer to a point at which returning to compliance with the JCPOA will not in and of itself recapture the benefits of the JCPOA, and that's because Iran has been using this time to advance its nuclear program in a variety of ways, including enriching uranium to 20% and even 60%, using more advanced centrifuges, acquiring more knowledge. And so, as the Foreign Minister said, we are discussing this among among ourselves, and we will look at every option to deal with the challenge.
Today, there are leaders in the Middle East who believe we can change history together. This partnership isn't just between Jews and Arabs, but between citizens of the world who want to be partners in the fight against climate change, against poverty, against the pandemic that has taken the life of millions.
United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister thanked the US for changing the usual conflict-driven narrative in the Middle East. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has so far refused to resume indirect talks with the United States in Vienna, on both sides returning to compliance with the deal under which Iran curbed its nuclear program in return for economic sanctions relief. The European Union envoy coordinating talks on reviving the Iran nuclear deal, Enrique Mora, met with members of Iran's nuclear negotiating team on Thursday. The meetings come 4 months after talks broke off between Iran and world powers, including the United States, to rescue the accord. Diplomats from Britain, France and Germany said that the meeting came at a critical time as Iran keeps advancing its nuclear program. Western diplomats have tentatively said that a return to the Vienna talks may be possible before the end of October. Iran struck the deal in 2015 with Britain, China, France, Germany, Russia and the United States. US President Joe Biden aims to restore the deal to restrain Iran's nuclear program, but the sides disagree on which steps need to be taken and when. Thus, the urgency to resume the talks from their left-off in June in Vienna remains to be seen. Bureau Report, DD India.
Britain's Queen Elizabeth has said that she was irritated by world leaders who talk about climate change but do nothing to address global warming. Climate activists from around the world were gathered outside the parliament in Stockholm on Friday ahead of the global climate strike on October 22nd. The strike will see young people join from around the world ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference COP26, which starts on October 31st in Glasgow, Scotland.
Friday saw a lot of heated activity across continents as a prelude to UN COP26 climate summit in Glasgow at the end of this month. It all started with Britain's Queen Elizabeth voicing her irritation at world leaders who talk about climate change but do very little or nothing to address the crisis. Her remarks came after opening Welsh Parliament on Thursday. The Queen, who is due to attend the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference COP26 in Glasgow, said that she still did not know who was coming. Speaking on green issues has become a major feature of the British royal family. Then came an indirect response from UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was seen telling school children in Bristol that he promises to get world leaders to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Further, the British organisers fear that Chinese President Xi Jinping's decision to not attend COP26 in person could be a prelude to China refusing to set new climate change goals amid an energy crunch. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said on Friday that he would attend the UN COP26 climate summit in Glasgow as his Conservative government faces global pressure to take further action to cut carbon emissions. Britain, which hosts the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties or COP26 in Glasgow from October 31st to November 12th, is seeking to get big power support for a more radical plan to tackle climate change. But before that happens, climate activists across the globe are set to go on a global climate strike on 22nd of October to press for climate justice and action. Bureau Report, DD India.
A fast-flowing river of hot lava continued to gush from Spain's Cumbre Vieja volcano on Thursday in the Canary Islands. Around 300 more people fled their homes early as flows of molten rock threatened to engulf another area on the Spanish island of La Palma. Emergency crews gave people living between the towns of Tazacorte and La Laguna a few hours to evacuate. With no end in sight to the eruption, which is in its fourth week, authorities said they were expecting the lava to flow to keep spreading northwest from the volcano. The red-hot lava has already laid waste to nearly 600 hectares of land and destroyed about 1,500 houses and other buildings, including a cement plant that gave off toxic fumes earlier in the week. A joint Russian-Chinese naval exercises began in the Sea of Japan on Wednesday, with the Russian Defense Ministry saying in a statement, according to the military, the exercises will last till October 17th and will feature ships of Russia's Pacific Fleet, including the anti-submarine ship, the corvettes, the minesweepers and a missile boat. The drill will also feature 12 planes and helicopters. The Russia said that the two countries started to hold joint naval drills in 2005. In 2020, the exercises were cancelled due to the pandemic. British songstress Adele made her highly anticipated music comeback on Friday, releasing her first new record since her 2015 Grammy Award-winning album 25. The song is the first to be released from her upcoming fourth album 30, out in November. Adele has named her albums after milestone ages in her life. She said that she had written 30 to explain her divorce to her young son. Adele split from charity executive Simon Konecki in 2019. The festival of Vijayadashmi or Dussehra was celebrated across the country today. The festival is celebrated to remember Lord Ram's victory over Ravan, marking the triumph of good over evil. The day also marks the culmination of Navratri and Durga Puja. President Ramnath Kovind, Vice President Venkaiah Naidu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi greeted the people on the occasion. And that's it in Newsnight for tonight. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.